In this program, we interview filmmakers Jeffrey Smith and Amy Hart about their film Secret Ingredients. They tell us how the film came about and reveal the simple truths about GMOs and the massive deception by commerce and government, and more importantly, what you can do about keeping you and your family healthy.
Good morning, Amy and Jeffrey, and welcome to the Low Carb Paleo Show.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mark. How are you doing?
Wonderful, thank you. I trust everybody is suitably wonderful as well.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
I don't know about suitably, but I'll give it my best try. So thank you for coming on our show today, and it's an honor to have the both of you. And we wanted to thank Kathleen online for connecting all of us, because she's the one that basically put it all together for us. So thank you again, Kathleen, for that. Jeffrey, you and I met a couple of years ago in Seattle, and I took your whole day course, and I took a couple of online classes as well. So I'm up on what's going on, not as much as you for sure, because you're right in the middle of it. And I even wrote a book about it. I don't know if you took a look at it, but that all comes thanks to you, because you got me really excited about the whole anti-GMO situation. And so we're glad to have you and Amy today to talk about your newest project, which is called Secret Ingredients. Can you tell us about this new exciting documentary?
Sure. I'll lay out the background, and then Amy can jump in and talk about what's actually popping in the film. I created a film called Genetic Roulette, and it documented the health dangers of GMOs and interviewed scientists and individuals and farmers and doctors, and it laid out in explicit detail what kind of damage can occur in the body and is occurring in the body, in our opinion, when you eat genetically engineered foods, and including those that are sprayed with Roundup herbicide, which is most of them. And so there's all sorts of reasons why, and we can get into in the show. But what the upshot of this film was, it was very successful. It was played hundreds of times on television in the United States as well as around the world. It was seen by millions of people online. And it was converting people to non-GMO diets. It is still converting people very, very rapidly. They realize that eating GMOs is likely to be contributing to whatever chronic illness they have. And so I was excited to see and hear so many testimonials of people getting better when they switched to non-GMO and often organic food. And I was, around the time that I released the film in 2012, I changed my lecture. I've been giving lectures as many as 50 or 60 a year. No, I mean as many as 100 a year or more. And I was giving about 50 in California for their labeling initiative in Prop 37. And I started to ask the audience, please tell us if you've noticed any health benefits after switching to non-GMO food. And how many people noticed, and I'd see the show of hands, and I would compare that to how many people had switched to non-GMO, and it was a substantial percentage. And then I'd ask, okay, what kind of disorders and diseases? And I started to notice a pattern right away. The number, because I'd ask how many people had that disorder, or how many people had that disorder. So in over 125 lectures now, I have found out that gastrointestinal problems are number one, and increased energy after switching is number two, and then there's allergies and asthma and skin conditions and weight loss and mood and behavior and like anxiety and depression and headaches and joint pain. And it was like absolutely predictable. In fact, at certain ones I said, okay, watch everyone, I'm going to show you the most popular, and it was. Now I'll show you the next most popular, and it was. And so I realized that we have in our midst 100,000 stories to share, and we needed to capture those stories to have an even more compelling film. A more compelling film that actually had real-life transformations that people could relate to. Because we had some of that in Genetic Roulette. Some parents of autistic kids were talking about the improvements in their children when they switched, things like that. But it was mostly not the testimonials, mostly not the actual case studies.
Before we go too far into what you've been doing and so forth, can you tell us about the trailer that you've got for your film?
Sure. We just put together some of the stars in our documentary, and you'll see in the trailer that they were suffering. They were suffering from a lot of chronic conditions. Primarily, there's Kathleen. She comes up right at the beginning and had a very horrific experience with herself and her family with all these different problems. And she discovered that the GMOs and the Roundup in the GMOs, the Roundup in the food, was in fact one of the secret ingredients that were driving these conditions, that were creating the vulnerability and whatnot. And she and others are presented in the film, backed up by doctors and by scientists and by data. And you'll see that there is a transformation that occurs that's very exciting.
Excellent. Let's have a look at that now.
So at the time that I was doing triathlons and living a healthy lifestyle, I met my husband. He also was very dedicated to healthy living, and we got married and started our family. So we had children and a brand new house, and we both had careers that we loved, and we were both active and physical, and that all came to a screeching halt in August of 2007.
I mean, after all, it's a poison.
The biggest fraud in the history of science.
And we are the guinea pigs.
We had 21 chronic diseases in one family.
I have had 3 miscarriages.
Things like cancer don't just happen. They happen for a reason.
We are losing control of our food supply. I've seen a rapid decline in children's health in the past 10 to 15 years.
We had to rent the nebulizer so often from the pediatrician that she suggested we buy our own.
My daughter was about 8 years old, and she was puffy, and she was starting to develop breasts.
His body was covered in rashes, head to toe, behind the knees, was so inflamed he was bleeding.
Kids who can't control themselves, kids who can't transition, kids who can't focus, kids who can't sleep.
A well-respected neurologist said that he would never speak and that he would never have peer relationships or social experiences, potentially not live on his own, never get married.
Why is a chemical company in charge of the food?
So many diseases and disorders have skyrocketed since the introduction of GMOs and Roundup in the food supply in the mid-1990s. Asthma, allergies, autism, ADHD, anxiety, autoimmune disease, and that's just the A's.
The science is sound. The science is there. You just have to look at it.
I've removed genetically modified food and had kids eat all organic food. No pesticides, no GMOs. And the changes I've seen are remarkable.
So we went from, your son has autism, your daughter has asthma, to no, they don't.
It's been 8 years since my diagnosis. I compete in triathlons, and I feel great. Her belly is completely flattened out, and she's stopped that accelerated development. She is where I feel like she belongs as an 11-year-old little girl.
Stephen now is an articulate, lovely, straight-A student with many friends, active, plays sports. He participates in a mainstream classroom without any supports, no speech therapy, no articulation disorder, no physical therapy, no occupational therapy. He does all the things other children do with great ease and elegance and grace, and he is perfect.
I am 22 weeks pregnant, and I feel fantastic.
This shift can only come by a global desire to change our food supply.
The removal of genetically modified foods, glyphosate, and pesticides was the fundamental, the foundation for why we all recovered.
Our families have been told a lie.
Amy, why don't you pick it up from there?
Yeah, Jeffrey was speaking at the Heirloom Seed Expo in Santa Rosa, California, and he was the keynote speaker and the moderator for the panel on GMOs that evening. And I was photographing it, hoping to do a photo essay about it. And we immediately started to talk afterwards about the possibility of making a film together with mothers who were sharing their stories of their families getting better. And we took that another step further to go into the homes. The idea originally was just get them on Skype, give their testimonials, but we wanted to go into the homes and get their very personal stories. And at another conference where Jeffrey was speaking in Washington, D.C., we again suggested to the audience that they share their stories. We had the video cameras set up, and the wonderful Kathleen came to do an interview with us. And when we met her, I knew she was it. She was our star. And we arranged with her to go to her home and interview herself, her husband, her 3 boys, and really to spend time in their home. We've been there on 3 occasions for almost a week at a time, literally just embedded into their home. And so what we've gotten to see is really their family lifestyle and how they've really changed everything in terms of their diet and come out the other side. At the beginning of the story, they had over 21 chronic diseases, and now they are all super healthy. And their son, who was autistic and couldn't even speak and couldn't control his body, he is now getting straight A's in mainstream classrooms. Their son, who was asthmatic and constantly having bronchial infections and on a nebulizer all of the time, he is now a star athlete and winning in tennis all over the place. Their youngest son, Trayson, who's a real card, he's hilarious. He always steals the show. He was covered in rashes, had eczema everywhere, his skin was bleeding. And when she changed to non-GMO diet, bang, these things changed. And mind you, before that, she had tried a lot of other dietary changes. She had tried gluten-free and dairy casein-free and a lot of different changes. They had gone to therapies. They had certainly tried every medical intervention. She had had a surgery for neuropathy that left her paralyzed. She had lost her job. She was on permanent disability because she could no longer walk. She could no longer function. She was in so much pain. She had myofascial syndrome. She had chronic fatigue. She had chronic pain. She was just suffering. And she did everything the doctors told her. And she started to suspect that there was something in the food. And part of what did it was that her husband, who is an incredible athlete, is a natural bodybuilder, and he developed a breast tumor. And they found out it was a breast tumor in men that the doctor said there's nothing you can do. All you can do is have surgery. It's called gynecomastia. And he, was reluctant to have a surgery about this. Isn't there anything else we can do? And Kathleen had been reading about dietary changes and the impact on the body. And she said, hey, how about that soy? Why don't we try eliminating soy from your diet? So they eliminated the soy products from his diet, and sure enough, within 3 months, the tumor was gone. It was completely gone. And at the same time, her youngest child, Trayson, had developed this strange body odor, and they didn't know what was going on. And it was like puberty. And she took the soy out of her diet because she was breastfeeding, and sure enough, it went away. Now, soy can really affect the hormones. But what they didn't realize later, until much later, was that it was probably partially the GMOs in the corn that was doing this, and the pesticides. So she went through a lot of different dietary changes. She went to IIN, the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, and she started to really investigate how the diet plays a part in human health. And she healed her family. She really did. She experimented, and she found a way to heal her family. And we were incredibly fortunate to meet her and get to know their family. And she had home videos of her children and her son, who was completely autistic and couldn't function. And now he's getting straight A's in mainstream classrooms.
Yeah, that's a great story. Did you interview the moms as well from like Moms Across America? Because I know they're very active there.
Well, I have interviewed moms from Moms Across America in the past, and we know the founder, Zen, very well. But this particular, I mean, I've interviewed thousands of people from the stage, individually, etc. But what happened when we were interviewing Kathleen is there was certain aspects of her story that were unique. First of all, her experimental mind. She really experimented on herself, on her family, so that she was able to isolate the cause, because she had tried different dietary interventions. She had tried the medical model, and it was very interesting that at the time when she learned about GMOs and Roundup in the food, she had already done a bunch of dietary interventions and still had about 20 chronic conditions among the 5 of them. Then when she switched to non-GMO, within 2 weeks, she saw dramatic measurable changes, and within 3 to 6 months, the rest of the chronic conditions disappeared. And so that was one of the aspects. Another aspect was she wasn't going from junk food into a healthy diet with this dramatic change. She was already a top 10% triathlete in her class, amateur triathlete in the country. Her husband was a bodybuilder. They were active. They were eating well. That's what they thought. And what they did is they switched. They didn't completely dramatically change their diet so it didn't look the same. They went from pizza to pizza or whatever, and it was regular, normal pizza to non-GMO organic, in their case, gluten-free. And it was like a change that it looked the same, but the ingredients that were in that were different. And so it isolated more the causal nature of what was going on in terms of GMOs. And it was also a series of extremes. I mean, 5 people suffering from 21 chronic conditions, autism, permanent disability, really intense stuff. And I've heard every single one of them individually, but this was all stuffed into one family. Yeah. And then we also have other families and other individuals that are featured in the film. And right now we're doing a crowdfunding program to help us finish the production of it. It's in production. We're editing. We're still shooting some aspects of it, new interviews. And at Secret Ingredients Movie, the name of the movie is Secret Ingredients. And at secretingredientsmovie.com, people can make a donation and read more about it. And this is what's sort of providing our fuel for the film to get it out there. And we know it's going to be seen in a big way, because the last film we did, that I did, was seen by millions of people and had a huge impact. This, I'm quite confident, is going to have a much bigger impact because of this personalized, the personal stories that are involved.
We'll make sure to get the word out. And as soon as we're done here, I'm going to jump on there and then put my 2 cents in there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So if we see a donation for 2 cents, we'll know it's from...
No, actually, you should be looking for 2 centimes, 2 centimes.
Okay.
It's a French, euro version. For listeners that are now quite aware of what, the condition, what condition have you connected to genetically engineered food from all the talks you've done and the people you've interviewed?
It's interesting. I'm going to give a bigger picture than just naming the diseases, because the thing is, there's no single smoking gun public research or published research that says this causes this in the GMOs. I mean, we get very close with Roundup probably causing human cancers, but I'll describe that. If you look at the animal feeding studies on GMOs, as the American Academy of Environmental Medicine did 6 years ago, they identified gastrointestinal problems, immune system problems, accelerated aging, organ damage, reproductive problems, dysfunctional regulation of cholesterol and insulin. Since then, we've also seen multiple massive tumors, early death, birth defects, hormonal imbalance, damage to the reproductive organs in particular, and liver and kidneys especially. So we see these in the animal feeding studies that are very, very controlled, and sometimes as little as 90 days, and still the animals end up with signs of toxicity and other problems. Now, around 2009, when the American Academy of Environmental Medicine came up with this policy paper describing the problems and urging doctors to advise their patients to avoid eating GMOs. I went to their conference for the 4th year in a row, I think, and I brought a camera and I started interviewing the doctors, and they started telling me, because they had been prescribing non-GMO diets, that their patients were getting better, and often from the same categories of diseases and disorders that the animals were suffering from in these lab studies. So I went to the doctor's offices with a camera, started interviewing, and sure enough, one woman in 3 days, her Crohn's disease symptoms disappeared. Within 28 days, she had lost 10 pounds and her skin condition was clearing up. Another person, irritable bowel was gone within 3 weeks. Another one was within 6 weeks. A 9-year-old his gut pain was gone completely that had been debilitating. At another office, there was a 12-year-old who no longer needed an asthmatic inhaler and no longer had migraines 2 or 3 times a week. I mean, these were dramatic stories. And when you ask the individuals, what did they do to get rid of GMOs? Well, oftentimes they switch to organic or reduce processed foods. Maybe they also at the same time reduce dairy or gluten, in which case you have confounding cofactors that might explain the difference. But at the same time, I started to interview farmers who took farm animals off of GMOs, and they described the same improvements. You know, they'd say their pigs no longer had diarrhea, and the people said they no longer had irritable bowel. Same thing, different names, and often the same amount of time. And when the animals get rid of GMOs, they don't become gluten-free or switch to organic. It's just the GMO. And so between the animal feeding studies, which are tightly controlled, the livestock experience, which is only a single ingredient switch, they were providing supporting evidence that the reason why these people in the doctor's offices were getting better was because of the GMOs. Yeah. And then I started asking people and interviewing people, and now we have a survey out that we're going to be publishing that show these type of diseases and disorders associated with a self-report on what's getting better. Now, if that's the case, if you are seeing changes in these areas and they are significant, then you should be able to see them in rising disease rates in the United States. And that's what we are seeing. If you look at the research papers by Nancy Swanson, etc., you can see correlated with the rise of GMOs and the rise of the use of Roundup, because Roundup is very tied with GMOs, and I'll explain that soon. You see a dramatically tight correlation with an increase in autism. So as the glyphosate, or that's the active ingredient in Roundup, as that increases, the same curve increases with autism and diabetes and irritable bowel and inflammatory bowel and congenital birth defects and deaths from senile dementia, stroke, Alzheimer's, obesity, high blood pressure, and intestinal infection, and all sorts of cancers, thyroid cancer, liver cancer, pelvic cancer, kidney cancer, all of these things, plus mental conditions and mood and behavior conditions, insomnia, schizophrenia, anemia, anxiety, ADHD, all of them tightly correlated with this increase. In every single case, we can look at the characteristics of GMOs and say, aha, this could be why that particular disease or disorder is linked. Now, the characteristics of GMOs, we'll just look at 3 of them right now, just 3 out of the several that we've examined. One, the process of genetic engineering itself causes massive collateral damage in the DNA. So you can have a new allergen like they have in Monsanto's corn, a higher levels of an existing allergen like they have in Monsanto's soy. They can have new toxins or higher levels of existing toxins, nutritional problems, and just that background noise that accompanies the process itself could explain it all, because it's unknown and it could basically cause anything. Then if you look at the corn and the cotton plants, particularly the corn, genetically engineered to produce an insecticide called Bt toxin, which punches holes in the walls of the stomachs of insects to kill them. We'll now know that it can punch holes in human cells. So that might relate to the gastrointestinal disorders. We know that the Bt toxin also can create immune responses. That can relate to a lot of the immune problems that people are experiencing. And then you have the Roundup. Roundup is sprayed on 80 or 90% of GMOs on the marketplace because they're designed to be, quote, Roundup ready. They're genetically engineered, their DNA is altered with genes from bacteria to withstand doses of herbicide which would normally kill it. So because it survives, the farmer can just spray over the top of the field and weed more easily. But the Roundup gets absorbed into the crop. Now, Roundup is very interesting. We could talk for days on Roundup. I won't. I have. But Roundup, its active ingredient, was just declared by... Amy's going to sleep with us. She's heard this a million times. Roundup's active ingredient was just declared a probable human carcinogen. It's called glyphosate by the World Health Organization. So that could explain the cancers. But it also absorbs or binds with minerals, making them unavailable so it can deplete our minerals. And that has a huge amount of problems associated with it. For example, by binding with manganese and cobalt, it can disable a pathway in the gut bacteria that creates the precursors to serotonin, melatonin, and dopamine. If we are deficient in those, that can explain the mood and behavior issues, obesity, it can explain blood sugar problems, the Parkinson's association, the insomnia, because these neurotransmitters operate at all those levels. It also blocks another pathway in the body that produces vitamin A. And so there's a universal deficiency in vitamin A in the United States. That could be related. It also blocks the ability of the liver to effectively detox other poisons. And so the presence of other poisons becomes amplified in the presence of glyphosate or Roundup. It also is an endocrine disruptor. So it can mess up the balance between estrogen and testosterone, which can affect reproductive health. It can damage reproductive organs. It also is an antibiotic. It kills the beneficial gut bacteria. You know, the microbiome is like the superstar these days in medicine. It's like the number one thing. And it turns out that our microbiome is at risk every time we eat something that has glyphosate, an antibiotic, because it selectively kills the beneficial bacteria like lactobacillus and bifidobacteria, the stuff we pay for, but not the Clostridium, the Salmonella, the Botulism, E. coli, the negative stuff which can overgrow, and that can also create leaky gut, which is linked to half the diseases on the list. So as you can see, the more we could talk about the damage to mitochondria, we could talk about the suppression of the digestive enzymes, we could talk about all these aspects of what glyphosate and Roundup do, and that could explain essentially the entire list of diseases and disorders that are related to GMOs. And so this raises an interesting point. I know a lot of your listeners are very into food. Okay. And so they're wondering, what's the takeaway here? And they're thinking, we need to avoid GMOs. And I say, absolutely, avoid GMOs. But Roundup is also sprayed on wheat. It's also sprayed on rye, on rice, and barley, on lentils, on sugarcane. It's sprayed on a lot of things just before harvest to dry down and kill the product as a ripening agent. And so the best way to avoid Roundup is not only to avoid Roundup Ready crops, the genetically engineered brands, which there's 9 food crops, 6 of them are Roundup Ready, but to just switch to organic altogether. And that's what we're seeing in the film. We're interviewing people that switch to organic wherever possible, not necessarily 100%, but often, in some cases, very, very large percentages, and that is associated with these dramatic recoveries.
And again, they didn't switch from junk food to vegetables. They went from vegetables to vegetables, meat to meat, and occasional pizza to pizza. I mean, these are people who really ate pretty healthy foods, and some of them are starting their own gardens and everything, but they're eating essentially the same foods. If you look at their dinner table, I mean, one night they're having tacos, or the other night they're having a chicken salad. Whatever it is, it's the same kinds of foods. It's just different ingredients. It's GMO free, it's pesticide free, it's 100% organic, and that's what's made the difference.
I wanted to share something. Because I'm aware of all these issues, I typically eat very cleanly, but I can't avoid social events once in a while. I don't want to make a pariah of myself by criticizing everything they serve. So I just jump in and eat. I try to pick and choose, but I eat whatever is available. And I was this weekend I was invited to 2 social events, so I got to eat twice the amount of regular food that people eat. Well, guess what? After the weekend, my digestive system was rebelling, and I could tell. I mean, if I move away from my clean diet, the next day I know it sounds silly, but this is what happens to people that are actually making an effort to eat cleanly. They have to confront family events and social events. And you want to be able to live without making fool of yourself in general. So that's my personal experience with it. I'm typically very healthy, but I do know, and I know it's a consequence of it. If I go to some social events, that I will suffer the next day, for the next couple of days.
We eat a variety of foods. It's just all organic. And when you divert from that, it can be really painful on the body. That's been my experience of really kind of suffering after going away from that. And it is hard socially. And what I feel is it should be easy. It should be easy. It should be easy to shop for organic. It should be easy to eat in a restaurant. It should be easy to go to a party, because this should be the norm. Why is it the norm that our food is poison, that it's toxic?
Your experience is something that I have heard maybe 1,000 times. And here's my interpretation. Not everyone is sensitive. Not everyone has that experience where if they occasionally go off the diet, they're going to feel it. The people that are most sensitive are the ones tend to be more the ones that'll be switching to a non-GMO diet because they're desperate for something, they're suffering from something, and I hear sometimes that becomes the proving ground, that they're not sure what the difference is or what was the cause. But when they go out to eat, or they eat at a friend's house and they eat something different, and all those symptoms pop up, not necessarily full blown, that is their proof that it's the food. And then they can identify, and even in some cases, some people can eat the soy and corn in Europe, which is non-GMO, and they cannot eat the soy and corn in the United States. Yeah. I hear that hundreds of times. So we have a situation where the more sensitive people, the canaries in the coal mine, so to speak, can be the monitors for all of us. And on that sensitivity, it's interesting, talking to one of the doctors, the physicians that we interview for the film, she talks about a certain percentage of her children, she's a pediatrician, who get better just because of the food. Maybe 20% or so. And it's actually higher with some other doctors. It's much higher with some others that do mostly food intervention. But when she doesn't do anything else, just changes the food, it can change. And so what she finds also is that, let's say there's a kid that's autistic and she prescribes a non-GMO organic diet for the autistic child. The whole family switches to organic, and she's not treating the other family. She's not giving them any pills or anything like that. And all of a sudden, the mom's irritable bowel syndrome disappears, and the daughter's asthma disappears, and everyone loses weight. And they're all going, my God, we didn't know that the food was causing all these problems. And yet there's some people who don't appear to be so sensitive. And so this information that we're giving is not going to be hitting your audience in an equal manner. Not everyone's going to get the same benefits from switching to non-GMO and organic. But here's my suggestion. Sometimes when we change our diet and we get better, we may not remember all of the symptoms that we had weeks ago when we started that diet. We may not remember that we had trouble sleeping. We may not even think about short temper or impulsiveness, maybe with our children, or etc. Maybe our friends will notice that they haven't seen us for a while and they come and say, there's something different about you. So I recommend that when people switch to an organic diet, they do it consciously and actually make a little medical and emotional journal and figure out, indicate what are the symptoms that are going on now, and then make the change in a week, take a look and make a note, and in a week. And then within 4 to 8 weeks, usually in some cases, I often ask, how long will it take? And again, there's the sensitivity, and children are really sensitive. I'll give you 2 examples from children that I think the parents will really appreciate. I had one woman stand up in a lecture I was giving at MIT, and I asked if about changes with the change into diet. She said, I saw your film, Genetic Roulette, and my son was out of control. He was violent. They wanted to kick him out of school. She told me later they wanted to actually label him retarded. And she saw my film, changed the diet, and all the symptoms went away. And now he's doing very well at school. I said, how long did it take? And she paused and said, about a week. and then she said, within a month, I had a new son.
Wow. And
then I talked to this other woman who was volunteering at a booth for Institute for Responsible Technology, our organization. And she said, I have to tell you this. I saw your film, Genetic Roulette. And when I saw it, I realized this is what's causing my grandson to be off the wall, just off the wall, and maybe asthmatic and whatnot. And so she said to her son, if there's anything you do in this world, in your life, because I ask you, watch this film. I mean, talk about a guilt trip, but he did. He watched the film and he came up to his mom and said, all right, I'm going to change his diet. So they took the kid off of GMOs and switched him to organic, and they no longer got the calls from school that he was bouncing off the walls. He no longer had breathing problems. And she said this, except the day after he eats at the other grandparents' house. Because they feed him the same old junk food, and the next day they get the calls from school. So that's the sensitivity I was talking about.
Yeah, we've heard this from other grandparents, that it's a struggle. You know, they see their grandchildren blowing up like balloons, you know, and we certainly hear it from parents as well, but it's a little hard as grandparents when you see your grandchild suffering and there's a pattern in the household that you feel you have no control over. But people often enter the story from the issue of weight loss. They want to lose weight. And that's so pervasive, certainly here in the U.S., of people obsessed with their weight. And one of the sort of side effects of going non-GMO, gluten-free, or certainly organic is that people just naturally lose weight. Yeah. And that a lot of the people that we've talked to, it's just, oh yeah, I lost that 15 pounds without even thinking about it. I eat whatever I want now. I don't get bloated. And what I've noticed and what I've heard from a lot of people is a puffiness goes down, sort of an inflammation, a puffiness around the face, and also the joints. So if the switch to organic, if I go back at the party, you know, and eat the crackers and cheese, God forbid, I don't feel it just in my gut. I feel it in my knees. My knees get inflamed. My sinuses get inflamed. My tennis elbow flares up. The joints it really affects my joints a lot. So the non-GMO, all organic, pesticide-free diet allows my body to feel clean. And when the liver is clean and all the organs are functioning, it can process the food effectively and release the toxins. So they're not building up in the body and they're not holding on to fat and they're not building up this puffy, weighted feeling. And that's what most people are wanting to be relieved from. Like, I just want to lose weight. But it's not the weight. It's what's inside that weight, the toxins inside of that weight. And when you clean out those toxins, the weight just falls away.
Yeah, speaking of which, another personal situation is that my son has been struggling with weight. And you think that having a dad like me would help him understand all these issues, but no, I'm the weirdo. You know, I'm the strange one. I'm the health nerd. I'm the crazy one with all these theories and everything. So he... a couple of weeks ago, he approached me and he showed me these products, you know, basically a weight loss product. And I said, for God's sake, I mean, I started to break it down, you know, GMOs. I said, look, you're 34 years old, you're an adult. You decide what you want, but you need to know this is crap and you should not take it. And he went ahead and took it. But now he's bragging, oh, I lost 15 pounds, blah, blah. I say, yeah, but it's not the healthy way to lose weight. And I don't know at which point he's going to realize that maybe Dad was right, but I'm probably the wrong person to tell him that.
To tell him that. Alain, I say to people come to me all the time and say, what do I do to tell my son or my father or whatever? I say, you don't do it. Allow me to do it. because you're discounted. Because of your relationship. I said, just show them the film Genetic Roulette. And I remember in the premiere in Los Angeles, two people came up to me. A mom came up to me with her 16-year-old daughter and said, I want you to know as a testimony to your film, and I hadn't shown it to a group yet, right? He said, my daughter wanted to wait in the car while I watched the film. She was totally not into this. And now she's saying, we got to remove GMOs from our diet. So it's a testimony that I was able to, I've been talking to my daughter for years about this, and now, and then a mother came up, a woman came up and said, as a testimony to your film, my husband is now, I've been telling about this, and now he's ready to get rid of GMOs. So the thing is this is why the importance of having films, third party. And this is, by the way, again, I want to make an appeal for support to Secret Ingredients, because this is a film that you get to share with your grandchildren or your kids that have their grandchildren or your grandparents, etc. That'll be, I think, the most effective, easy thing for you to pass on. So, Alain, we'll try this experiment, okay? If you doesn't get a chance to see Genetic Roulette, show them the film Secret Ingredients when it comes out, and then let me know. Let me know if it does the trick.
I'll have to be sneaky about it, because if I tell him I'm coming to show him a movie like this, he'll lock the door. He say, I don't want to see your movies, because he thinks I'm the crazy one. But on the more serious a question just popped up in my mind. You do realize that the pro-GMO people, especially the scientists, will say, well, this is all nice and it's all, but it's only stories, there's no scientific study to prove all of this. So what would you tell these people?
Well, first of all, there's enormous evidence now that GMOs are dangerous, and that what they do is distort, deny, and cover up the issues. And we expose some of that in this film, and of course in the movie Genetic Roulette and the books that we've written and all. So they're wrong when they say there's no evidence. I mean, we have plenty of evidence, and we point that out in the film. We always win the scientific debate. We always win because we have the data on our side. We just have to have a long enough debate. We have to explain, oh, they claim there's no problem. Well, if you look details into that, it turns out there were signs of toxicity. When that was extended to 2 years, the signs turned into actual damage. We can always win the debate on the level of science. But here's the point. I know that we are very, very welcome in the progressive medical community. I speak at medical conferences all the time. So we're winning that argument too. We have thousands of doctors prescribing non-GMO diets. And this film, Secret Ingredients, will actually drive many, many more doctors to that conclusion. But if you look at what is our goal here, is our goal to try and convince the scientist who's shilling for Monsanto to be convinced? No, we're going to pull our hair out. I'm going to lose the rest of my hair if I try and do that.
That's okay. Mark is ahead of you.
Oh, thank you. Now I cut the average between the two of you. So what we're doing, actually, our focus is very strategic. In fact, the choice of doing this film is very strategic. It's not random. Our focus is to create a tipping point of consumer rejection so that the marketplace rejects GMOs. So we don't have to go to the Obama administration for a bailout saying, please, the Obama administration has been more pro-GMO than the Bush administration. We don't have to go to Congress. We don't have to go to the FDA. We don't have to try and fight it in the courts. We can do what happened in Europe here. In Europe, people were educated about GMOs. They kicked it out of the food supply for human food supply. It's still in the animal feed, but they kicked it out of the human food supply because it was kicked out not by the politicians, but by Nestle's and Unilever and McDonald's and Burger King, because consumers didn't want to have it. So now we have collectively created a tipping point in the United States in the natural products industry. GMOs have been kicked out almost entirely there. And we're on the verge of a tipping point in the conventional food industry. So you ask, how is it that we're going to get the Walmart shopper, the Safeway shopper, to select the products that say non-GMO on the shelves? The answer is you select the people you want to convince. Who are the people? You can't convince the junk food eating couch potato who hasn't related food to health to stop eating GMOs. He'll never know that he's eating a GMO. He'll never know we got rid of it for him. What we do is we convince the moms. And in particular, the moms that are struggling to protect the health of kids that may be more sensitive, that may be struggling with chronic conditions, and most kids are. So we have a situation where we can create the entire tipping point just by going to this most receptive group, the most concerned group, who may not even switch food on their own basis for their own health, but for their kids, they'll do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Moms are the most powerful force on earth. Don't piss off moms, because they will.
That's right, Judes.
they will protect their children. So yes, it's absolutely right. So
mothers are really struggling with this. It takes a lot of time and energy to take care of sick children. And think of the autistic children. It's about 1 in 50 right now. Children in America are autistic. It's about 1 in 50 children are diagnosed with autism in the United States right now. That is overwhelming for a family. And that's the extreme case. But the asthma, the allergies, they can't eat this, they can't do that, the rashes, the eczema, just the chronic illness that's going on certainly in this country is overwhelming. And mothers are tired. It's too much to take care of all of these sick children. And they're feeling run down themselves. That's how Kathleen, the star of our film, Secret Ingredients, felt. She just felt overwhelmed. She felt lousy in her own physical body, and all of her children were sick. And she just kind of put 2 and 2 together and said, there is something wrong here. There's got to be something wrong. And of course, none of her doctors ever said that. And in fact, the doctor that had signed the form for her to go on permanent disability, and she had to bring those forms back and say, look, I'm ready to go off now. He said, that never happens. That's less than 1% of the people who are on disability and then go off. And by the end of the conversation, he offered her a job to teach himself and his staff and his patients about nutrition, because they're just not thinking about it. And sadly, this physician had to admit that he had 1, maybe 2 hours of nutrition training in medical school. It's just not being cultivated in the medical community for the large part. And, the first health books in the world were cookbooks. Food is medicine. What we eat does affect us. And we've been taught by the industry now that it's just about what's pretty and what's convenient and what's fast and what can pop in the microwave the quickest. And that is not food. That's not nourishment. That might be calories, but it's not nourishment. And there is a difference. There is a difference. And the food that we're growing now, not only is it processed and everything, but the grains themselves are lacking in minerals and nutrients. Glyphosate, which is the key ingredient in Roundup, that's sprayed on the Roundup-ready crops, the GMO crops, used to be an industrial cleaner. Glyphosate was an industrial cleaner to clean industrial pipes and boilers and to pull out the heavy mineral deposits along the side of it and clean them out. It's also an antibiotic, so it killed the bacteria in the pipes and boilers. And then when the wash would go through and went onto the field, it killed everything in the field. And they noticed, that could be a good herbicide. And then Monsanto patented the glyphosate as an herbicide. Now, do you want something like that in your belly? I don't think so. I don't. I really don't. So what's happening in the plants is that it's being depleted. The minerals are literally being depleted in the plants. And the minerals are being depleted in our body. That's what glyphosate's designed to do. So maybe we're eating a lot of calories, but we're not getting a lot of nutrition. And that's what getting back to organic is all about. And getting back to the farmer's market and getting back into the kitchen. And that's a big message of this film, is moms and dads and kids have to get back in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Okay, enough with the McDonald's already. It's not working for us. It's not working. We have to get back into the kitchen. Get back to the kitchen table. Get back to the community table. Get back to the potluck dinners. The two of the families in the film, they get together on a regular basis and they make dinner together. They don't cook here and there and then we bring it together. No. One person doesn't do it and stress out. No. They get together, they bring the ingredients into the kitchen and they open the wine and they have a party and they cook. And they have a blast. We need to get back to the kitchen and enjoy it.
As a professional chef, I understand exactly, but I have found it very hard in this country to convince people to actually start cooking food from scratch. I'm actually teaching a family right now to cook from scratch, and even though the mom was, she was really trying very hard to clean the diet for the kids, she said, "Oh my God, I didn't realize how much crap I was still feeding to my children, even though I thought I was doing the right thing."
You know, you mentioned earlier the formula that your son is drinking to lose weight. What about the baby formula?
Yeah.
The number one ingredients, the top 3 ingredients in baby formula are all GMO. They're soy,
sugar,
they're corn syrup. This is what we're feeding infants. It doesn't work. It makes them sick.
Yeah.
It's not healthy. Luckily, there's one company that's coming out with a non-GMO formula.
I want to add something just because I'm friendly with my inner attorney. It makes them sick, in your opinion.
In my opinion. In my opinion.
And I agree with your opinion. It makes them sick.
Opinion, in my opinion.
You know, I'm a mother too, and my son had mono in high school. I was feeding him perfectly good food. Little did I know it had GMOs in it. Why does my son have mono? I'm feeding him chicken and broccoli and brown rice. Did I know it had GMOs in it? No. You know, that's not fair. That is not fair.
Well, let me take this as a moment for those that have no idea what's a GMO and what's not a GMO, they're asking that question like saying, well, what do I need to do? So, by the way, broccoli is not genetically engineered. Rice is not genetically engineered, but. All right. So there's 9 genetically modified food crops, 9 of them only at this point, that are commercialized. The 6 major ones are in a lot of foods: soy, corn, cotton, which is used in cottonseed oil, canola for canola oil, sugar from sugar beets, which is most of the sugar in the United States, and then alfalfa, which is used as animal feed, as hay. In fact, all the other of the 6 are also fed to animals in one way or the other. Now, that's fairly pervasive. And the other 3 are some papaya from Hawaii or China, some zucchini, and some yellow squash. There's a potato and an apple that was approved this year that might go on the market next year if we're unlucky. So these are the GMO crops. And so in order to avoid them, I'd recommend going to non-GMOshoppingguide.com. Non-GMOshoppingguide.com has a list of 32,000 products that have been verified as non-GMO. It lists the 9 foods. It lists the derivatives of the 9 foods, which are much more important because you don't necessarily know that soy can be producing lecithin and soy protein isolate and whatnot, and corn can be producing maltodextrin and dextrose and high fructose corn syrup. So sometimes you won't even know the derivatives named are related to the soy or the corn, etc. So we have a list of those. So we recommend that the number 1 recommendation is to buy organic. And if you can't buy organic, at least avoid GMOs. And you can do that even in restaurants, especially if you ask about the oil and the salad dressing, which are often soybean oil, or in Canada, canola oil is pretty prevalent, and it's also more prevalent in the United States. Sometimes corn oil. All those are genetically engineered: soy, corn, and canola, as well as cottonseed oil. So there are ways to avoid it, and we help people at non-GMOshoppingguide.com. The simplest is to buy products that say organic. And organic is not allowed to intentionally use GMOs. Yes, there can be cross-contamination. Yes, there can be pollution of it. The gold standard is to say something that says organic and non-GMO project verified. When those 2 are together, that's the highest quality, because the non-GMO project does require testing to see if there's contamination and has limits there. But the organic just has the policy not allowed to use GMOs, but doesn't necessarily require testing in case there is contamination. But the organic is also important because if you buy rice or wheat or barley or oats and things like that, and lentils and whatnot, if it's not organic, it might be sprayed with Roundup. So yeah, buying non-GMO is great. Buying organic is better. Buying organic and non-GMO verified is the best.
For the food geeks out there like me, keep in mind that most of the animal meat you eat is also fed genetically engineered corn, soy, alfalfa, and that gets into the meat, and you eventually absorb that as well. So keep that in mind when you eat I always suggest grass-fed beef, grass-fed, grass-finished beef, wild-caught fish, so on and so forth.
And on that point, Alain, I'd like to popularize among your audience to ask the grass-fed beef and the grass-fed producers to write on their label, no GMO alfalfa, because grass includes alfalfa. And the grass, they could theoretically say 100% grass-fed and still be feeding them GMOs. They probably don't, but they should. We want to popularize it and demand it so that it will create not only safer food supply, but it will create economic pressure for the ranchers and farmers who want to raise 100% grass-fed to not buy the alfalfa that's genetically engineered, because they wouldn't be able to put that on their onto their labeling, in which case they would lose sales if they don't have it on there. So let's make that a reality.
Right.
Okay,
so
cool.
if I buy, farm-raised chicken, free-range chicken, and I think, oh, I'm feeding my son a healthy dinner, that is not necessarily GMO-free. And it's certainly not necessarily pesticide-free. So the important thing is to go all organic. And the brown rice, that can be sprayed with Roundup. So, even though you think you're feeding your family a healthy meal, it can be really deceptive. And so unless it's all organic, those toxins are probably getting into the food. And, some people say to me, family members, love you, but they'll say, well, you can't get this stuff out completely. Well, we can do a lot better. Yeah. We can go all organic. And the more of us that are shopping all organic, the more it's going to push the market. And, Alain, you were talking about not being obnoxious in restaurants. Well, when I have time, I go into a restaurant, and I always make sure I eat non-GMO. But I ask, do you have an all-organic dish? And if they say, there's nothing on the menu that I can give you that's 100% organic, as far as we know, I leave. I go somewhere else. And I'm sending them a message. I would like the option. Give me one dish on your menu that's 100% organic. As far as you know, everything in that dish is 100% organic. And I'll eat in your restaurant. And if not, I'm going to go somewhere else. And I think it's good to spread that message to restaurants. Let them think. It wasn't too long ago that people would go in and say, do you have anything that's gluten-free? And they were like, what are you talking about, lady? Now that's so common. Gluten-free this, gluten-free that, gluten-free this, gluten-free that. Everybody in any restaurant, they know what you're talking about. Certainly on the coast. But now, if we go in and say, where's the organic dish? Let's just put that into the minds of restaurateurs and say, that's our expectation. We want it organic. We want it all organic, but at least offer one dish.
Yeah, absolutely. And we need to keep that in mind. I don't go out and eat anymore because I know most of the stuff out there is crap. And as long as I'm a chef, I can cook better and a lot cheaper at home with the ingredients that I control. But if I do go out, then I only eat at restaurants that are known to use only local ingredients. And, and I know the chefs typically, and I talk to them, and I want to make sure the source is clean. It won't be 100% clean. And some of it are not certified organic because small farmers typically can't afford to do it. But I do trust my local farmers more than I would trust big corporations out there. So if I go out to a restaurant nowadays, I only go to restaurants that serve food that is being, collected the same day, or is being, locally grown and cleanly done. Because I know my farmers, and I know who's doing a right job and who is not.
Exactly.
I want to clarify one thing about meat. It's very good that you brought that up. If someone is selling certified organic meat, the animals are not fed intentionally GMOs. So that's one way to have meat that's from a non-GMO source. The other way is the 100% grass-fed without the alfalfa. The other way is wild caught for fish and for game. Although sometimes in areas where there's cornfields, you'll find sometimes the deer will be forced to eat the corn. Although it's interesting that we have heard stories from around the world and around the country that when given a choice, wild animals and even livestock will avoid eating the GMOs. And so We've seen, like, someone told me the classic story. He said, the farmer said, "Watch this," and he called the pigs over and scooped some corn and threw it in the field, threw it in front of them. They all looked down and looked up like, "What, are you kidding me?" And then he said, no. And then he went to the other side of the feed bin and scooped and threw the thing in the other way, and then all the pigs ran there and started eating. And the person says, "What was that? What was the first one?" He goes, "That was GMO. They won't touch it." Another farmer who had cows said these cows wouldn't eat the GMOs, and so he had some GMO feed he wanted to get through. So he put the non-GMO feed at the bottom of the trough and the GMO feed on the top, so they had to eat through to get to the bottom, because he had to come up with a psychology to get rid of the feed that he had. And we have, like, people that will nail a corn on the cob that's organic, that's non-GMO versus GMO on two different trees or two parts of the same tree in the winter to see what the squirrels' preferences are. And sure enough, I talked to someone, they ate the non-GMO immediately. The GMO not touched in the coldest days of Iowa winter. After 10 days, 5 or 6 kernels were eaten, and that's all they could handle. And then he took pity on them and nailed the non-GMO. I had one farmer, one seed salesman actually, they bought a bag of GM and non-GM corn on the cob and put it in their workroom to do the experiment in the winter. They forgot about it. They found the bags had been broken into by mice. And the non-GMO corn was eaten entirely. The GMO corn bag, there was a hole in it, but none of the kernels were gone. So they went in there, and then they got the heck out of there. So we should not be eating the food that the mice rejected.
Yeah, I mean, animals are innately smarter than we are because they haven't seen the advertisements.
That's right.
On the good side, I read that recently Scotland and now Germany decided to ban GMOs in their country. What's your take on that?
They're banning the growing of GMOs. The food companies have already banned the direct food in the human food chain back in 1999. But now they're formalizing their intentions to ban the planting of GMOs in those countries. It's great. So many countries ban it. There's only a handful of countries that actually grow it, but they grow a huge amount of it. And the United States and Canada, Argentina, Brazil, India, a little bit in China, Paraguay. These are the main GMO growing countries. But I think that with the tipping point coming soon, it's going to turn into a huge marketing liability for these countries. And any company that's still using GMOs is going to be scrambling to try and get rid of the GMOs as consumers reject it and other companies start putting their non-GMO label and increasing sales.
Yeah, but we've seen that in France, actually. In France, you can actually label products non-GMO. And one of the things that struck me the most was they started with eggs. When it first started off, it just had sort of no GMO in a little decal on the box. But as time has gone on, that has got bigger and bigger and bigger. And now, non-GMO is actually one of the most obvious decals on the box. And not only that, the number of different brands that have adopted non-GMO has slowly crept up the aisles.
Excellent.
We talk a lot about the mothers in this conversation and in the film and in various forums, but it's also up to the fathers. And we have wonderful fathers in the film Secret Ingredient who are in the kitchen. In fact, one of the fathers, the mother said, "Oh, well, he does most of the cooking," and he says, "Most?" because he does all the cooking. And all of the fathers, all of the families that we interview, the fathers are extremely active and extremely engaged in this story. And they're on board. And their message to other fathers is you've got to get on board too. You can't expect the mothers to do it all. It's got to be the fathers too, because you can't just have two different diets going on in the household, two different sets of food. No. Everybody has to be at the table eating the same thing and cooking the same thing and valuing the same thing, which is the health of the family. Yeah. So a lot of the fathers share that message in the film.
It's also a very good educational tool to teach the kids.
And the kids are cooking, and they're loving it. All of the kids in the film are in that kitchen. One of the families, they have chickens in the backyard and a garden. And, the kids go out and get the chickens every day and swing with them on the swing and get the eggs. And, I mean, they're really engaged in the process of raising and preparing food. All of the kids cook. Even the 4-year-old, he's up there on the chair, like cooking his cookies and everything. They all have their favorite things to cook, and they're involved in food. And
Excellent.
none of them have microwaves. They cook everything from scratch.
No microwaves.
Ideal.
To tell people no microwaves.
Indeed. Coming back to something you said earlier about the farmers noticing that when they stopped feeding GMO laced ingredients to their livestock, that the livestock's health improved. The great thing about animals is that there's no placebo effect, so it's a genuine health improvement.
But what's interesting is that the farmers are making more money. And this is not something that the biotech industry wants anyone to know about. But I'll tell you, Ib Pedersen from Denmark switched to non-GMO soy, paid more for the non-GMO soy, and still made $112 more per pig because he had 2/3 less antibiotics. He had lower death rate, lower birth defect rate, higher litter size, higher conception rate. I talked to a farmer from Western Iowa. He switched to non-GMO corn, was still feeding the soy, and within 3 days, he noticed that the piglets, he had 3,000 piglets in his nursery, their behavior changed. They were not sickly and lying down all the time. They were playing like piglets, and he realized that energy, and his medicine use dropped 75% very quickly. This is interesting. 14 years earlier, he had been chided by his brothers as having the easiest job on the farm because he was handling a very easy nursery of these piglets. And then for 14 years, he had the hardest job on the farm because he was constantly injecting these sick pigs. But he thought it was the new genetics, the new types of pigs brought into the area. He blamed it on Canada for Canadian bacon. They brought in some Canadian pigs. And so,
Canadians.
Right, you can't trust those Canadian pigs, I'm telling you. So when he switched to non-GMO corn, the light bulb went off and said, these pigs now look and act and are as healthy as they were before we started feeding GMOs. It wasn't the new genetics, it was the food. And so no placebo effect and a strong bottom line. He's spending 75% less on the medicines. So this is an example where it's cut and dry, and we need to get that information out to the livestock producers.
So you're telling me they're going to make more profit with non-GMO? We better keep that secret.
When the farmers switch to non-GMO feed, they'll make more money because they'll spend less on the medicines, lower death rate, higher, in some cases, conception rate and litter size. And so the biotech industry does not want livestock producers to know this because the vast majority of acreage grown for GMOs is fed to animals.
Okay.
And what Jeffrey has talked about is higher fertility rates in farm animals, in livestock, hearing these stories from farmers. And what we've been hearing is from families, from mothers, and from practitioners talking about a lot of infertility, a lot of miscarriages. And that's one of the stories that we're bringing into the film, is women who have been trying for years to get pregnant. And then when they were switched to a non-GMO, all-organic diet, boom. We have one practitioner who has had how many women?
100% effectiveness with her
65.
63.
63. So she's had 63 women come to her saying they were infertile. She switched them to non-GMO, all-organic diets, and she's had 100% success rate. Every single one of them have gotten pregnant and carried their healthy babies to term. 2 of them have had twins. So, this is substantial. Women are really struggling. They're going in for infertility treatments. They're having to take hormones and everything. Well, it's been shown that glyphosate is an endocrine disruptor. It affects the hormones. And the soy that's put into all of the products also affects the hormones. So these women are often eliminating GMOs and glyphosate from their diets, and many of them are also eliminating the soy altogether. And we have to remember that more than 90% of the soy in the US is genetically modified. So by getting that GMO soy out of the diet, that can have a huge difference and have a huge impact for women who are trying to have healthy babies.
That's excellent. So farmers make more money, women make more babies, all by avoiding GMO.
Healthy babies.
Healthy
Mark,
babies, even
we'll have
better.
to interview you for the film. We'll have to interview you, Mark, for the film.
You're more than welcome. You're more than welcome. And I've avoided most of those things since I was 16, and that's kept me doctor free for all those years.
Nice, wonderful.
You know, so that's one of the things that when you start taking charge of your health, it always pays dividends.
I want to just sort of close by giving people suggestions as to what they can do.
Yep.
'Cause I know a lot of people, there's some people that the only thing that they want to focus on is changing their diet. And we've already mentioned non-GMOshoppingguide.com to help guide with the non-GMOs and the buying organic. But other people may want to do more. We already mentioned the opportunity to support financially the film Secret Ingredients at secretingredientsmovie.com. And then some people may want to get involved with helping educate others. You can go to responsibletechnology.org, which is our Institute for Responsible Technology. You could sign up for our newsletter to keep informed, but also there's something called the Tipping Point Network, which are nearly 10,000 activists around the country meeting regularly for educating people in their local areas, showing films, doing presentations, trying to get Roundup eliminated from their parks and recreation department and their schools, etc., and then linking that to the food. There's a whole bunch of things that we've set up and are still rolling out that'll help people be activists, and we'll announce that in our newsletter. And there's also a speaker training program where you get a PowerPoint that's scripted and you get 7 hours of online training by me and whatnot. About 1,500 people have gone through that. So we have a plan to eliminate GMOs. In fact, the Institute for Responsible Technology has a 5-year master plan to eliminate GMOs in food and feed in most countries. And so we invite people to participate in that. And when you look at the strategies, and we know them in great detail. I've been doing this for 19 years, been over 40 countries doing this, and been testifying here and whatnot. When I look at all the strategies, and I think, if there's one thing that we could do that would move the needle, it turns out it's moving the needle in the United States in terms of the world, because this is the belly of the beast. And we've already tipped the natural products industry, so now we have to tip the conventional food eaters. There's a bunch of products in there that have already say non-GMO, grape nuts, Cheerios, the new Similac, etc. They say non-GMO. We need to drive more people to the non-GMO labeled products in these mainstream supermarkets, increase their sales so that everyone else in the food industry realizes they need to be non-GMO before their competitor switches to non-GMO and steals their customers. Then we create a tipping point. So how do we drive the shopper? The shopper is mostly women and mostly mothers, and the mothers that are concerned about the health of their families are the most sensitive, and the best ways to convince moms is with other moms who are struggling with the same thing, who've solved that problem, and that's backed by the science and backed by the doctors, and that's the name of this film, Secret Ingredients. And that's why we're doing this film, because in a strategic plan, when you look at the big picture, how do we save all living beings and all future generations in the planet from GMOs? It comes down to moms buying non-GMO with a little more percentage than are happening now. A little more percentage, and we win. So that's our thinking, and we'd like to encourage people, once the film does come out, to have everyone they know watch it so that we can make this viral, and then we can find ourselves a different job.
Yeah.
I wanted to say that I teach food as medicine at the local culinary school, and I always show genetic relate. So I'll make sure to show the one that's coming out.
Jeffrey, when I mentioned the food that I was feeding my son, like Kathleen, many mothers are feeding their children what we think is healthy food at the dinner table. But there's also those snacks, and there's also the birthday parties, and there's also the school lunch. And so even though we think we're feeding our families a square meal, it's deceiving to us. We don't know all of these other ingredients that are going into the food from the other sources. And one of the things that some of the mothers are working on now is school lunches. And there's a school in Marin County, a school district that just went all organic, non-GMO. And the more we can see school lunches go non-GMO, the more we can see hospitals go non-GMO, the better it is. And Kathleen brings a dessert to the birthday parties where her sons go to birthday parties. And not to be rude, but she just is really sharing this message as gently as possible with other mothers. Like, that's a nice blue birthday cake. Yeah, my kids are going to eat the carrot cupcakes over here. And, you know, we just have to kind of gently share the reality that we want to get back to real food. And whether it's in the schools or at home and everywhere in between, it's really important to just sort of gently let our voices be heard. That's our value. We want our children to be healthy.
Well, we've heard a lot of great information from the two of you today. Where's the best place for people to get more information? If there's one site they've got time to go to, where's the best place to go? Right now, it's secretingredientsmovie.com. Watch the trailer, share the trailer, support the film, and then when the film comes out, you'll be notified, and then share that. That's the biggest thing right now. secretingredientsmovie.com. Super job.
Thank you again, Amy and Jeffrey, for being on the Low Carb Paleo Show. And as we say in Texas, à votre santé, y'all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, y'all.
Thanks again, guys.
Safe eating.
Safe eating.